I was sitting on the hood of a car parked in front of license plate 128 when the door opened and they stepped out. She saw me, and her face lost color. Her eyes couldn't meet mine and she looked away. As I slid off the hood of the car, he raised his hands in a protective gesture and I said, "Don't worry, none of you are worth your time." I walked to my car, got in it, and drove away. It was a long story that led to this confrontation. I met Jim when his family moved in next door. He was 8, the same age as me, and was the only boy in the neighborhood. There were a few girls my age, but Jim and I were the only boys. We naturally gravitated toward each other, and by the end of 4th grade, we were as close as twin brothers. We played Little League baseball and soccer together at Pop Warner. I had his back and he had mine. If you joked with Jim, you joked with me, and vice versa. We were inseparable all the way through high school. And I met Laura when I was in 10th grade and we started dating. By senior year, we were still together. Jim became friends with Annabelle Spears, and they went on double dates with Laura and me. On prom night, Laura gave me her virginity in the next room where Jim and Annabelle were doing the same thing. High school graduation separated us. Jim didn't want to go to college and joined the Navy. Annabelle called him all kinds of dirty words for running away and leaving her. But despite that, she said she would wait until he got a permanent duty station and then join him. Laura and I went to college. I to Eastern Michigan University, majoring in civil engineering, and Laura to the University of Michigan, majoring in information technology. The University of Michigan in Ann Arbor and the University of Michigan in Ypsilanti were only a half-hour drive from each other, so Laura and I were able to maintain a more or less stable relationship. I say more or less because a couple times Laura canceled dates with me to go on a date with a guy she met at the university, but of course she didn't tell me about it. I found out from friends who also went to Michigan, and they also told me that she was dating on the nights I didn't show up. One night I arrived just in time to see her get into a car with some guy and drive off. I followed them to a restaurant on Ann Arbor Road, gave them 10 minutes to go inside and get settled, and then followed them. I found them in a booth on the last row, sitting side by side instead of across from each other. He had his arm around her, and she made no attempt to push him away or move away to leave any distance between them. Luckily, there was a booth at the other end of the room where I could sit, and Laura couldn't help but notice me. But it wasn't until the waitress asked what I'd like to drink, and Laura heard my voice that she looked in my direction. I pretended to read the menu and didn't look directly at her, but I saw her eyes get big, and she suddenly pushed the guy's hand away and moved away from him. The look on his face when she did that clearly said, "What are you doing?" That look told him that this wasn't their first time together, or even their second or third. They'd been together long enough for him to put his arm around her comfortably and realize that she didn't mind. I have no idea what they were talking about, but Laura kept glancing nervously in my direction, and I sat there pretending not to notice her. I finished my meal, got up and left, without once letting Laura notice that I was looking at her, and then I drove home. The next day was Friday, and Laura and I had a date planned for Friday night, dinner and a movie. That Friday night I missed our date. I didn't call or cancel, I just didn't go. I turned off my phone and settled in with a good book. Saturday I went to a party at the Delta Phi house and had a great time. I met a dark-haired beauty named Robin. We danced a couple times and she gave me her phone number and asked me to call her. On Sunday, I was head deep in my textbooks getting ready for Monday's class when the doorbell rang. I got up, walked to the door, looked through the telescope and saw it was Laura. I opened the door and she squeezed past me and into the room and then turned to me and said, "Where have you been? Where were you Friday night and why didn't you answer the phone?" I closed the door, turned to her, and asked what question she wanted me to answer first. "What?" "It was 3 questions. Which one do you want me to answer first?" "Don't be nice, Rob. What's going on?" "Okay, then I'll answer them in the order I like. First about where I've been. Mostly here, although Saturday night I went to a frat party. Next is why I haven't been answering my cell phone. This one is simple. I wasn't picking up the phone because he wasn't calling. Of course, that's my fault since I'm the one who unplugged him. Next, where were you Friday night?" "I was here. I ordered pizza and spent the evening reading a really good book." "Why didn't you call me and let me know you weren't coming?" "I figured you already had something going on with your boyfriend." "My boyfriend? What are you talking about, Rob? You are my boyfriend." "Huh? Then who were you in love with at the restaurant Thursday night? He's just an acquaintance of mine, and we weren't in love with each other. Sitting next to you hip to hip, you leaned against him and he put his arm around you isn't lovey-dovey? Then what would you call it? It doesn't mean anything, Rob. We're just friends. Snap. If you don't think you're doing anything wrong, Laura, why don't you stand up, come over and say hello? How about inviting me to join you and introduce me to your friend? Maybe sit down with me and have a few words with me before you go on your date. Maybe you didn't do that because then he might wonder who I was and you didn't want to tell him. Why didn't you get up and walk over if it bothered you so much? Because I wanted to see how you acted. To see how I act? Why would you want to do that? Snap. Because I've had too many people tell me about how much you date when I'm not around. I've also been told that you've been going out with guys on the nights your dates with me got derailed, so yeah, I wanted to see how you'd behave with another guy. You don't own me, Rob. Nowhere does it say we're in an exclusive relationship. I thought it did, Laura. I seem to remember giving you my cool ring and a letter sweater as a sign that we weren't breaking up. A sweater with a letter on it? A ring? We're doing well? Come on, Rob, that's so high school. Maybe, but it happened in high school, and when we left school, I don't remember you giving me those things back and saying, we're done with school, so all bets are off. But that's okay. Since you don't feel like it binds you, I guess I can look at it the same way. I met a nice girl at that party and she gave me her phone number, so I guess I can call her now. Laura got a nasty look on her face and she hissed, "Fine, go ahead, I don't care," and walked away. As she walked away, I thought about the fact that she didn't make excuses, didn't say she wouldn't do it again, and didn't try to convince me that I was her one and only. In her mind, she was no longer a schoolgirl, she was a grown woman, and things had to be different. It wasn't easy to do since we had been together for so long, but it was better to find out what was on her mind now than later. I had a bunch of homework on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, so it wasn't until Thursday that I was able to call Robin. We talked for a bit, and then made a date for Friday night. I picked her up, we had dinner, and then instead of a movie, she decided she wanted to go to a party she knew about. The party was at an apartment in Belleville. We got there a little after 8, and it was just meant to be. The first people I saw when we walked in the door were Laura and the guy she was going out with Thursday night. "Holy shit," I said. "What's up?" Robin asked. "Them," I said, pointing at Laura and the guy. "Do you know them?" "I know her." "Do you know Ms. Piggy?" "Ms. Piggy?" "That's her nickname." "Why does she have that nickname?" "She's a whore, a real pig. That's why someone called her Miss Piggy." "Are you sure she's a whore?" "What else would you call a girl who has a steady boyfriend who she says she's going to marry but wastes her time with other guys when he's not around?" "Are you sure you know that for sure? I mean the part about the spread?" "No. Honestly, I don't know it personally, but I've heard it from a few guys who said they flirted with her." "You didn't say how you know her." "I'm the guy she was going to marry until I caught her last Thursday with the guy she's standing with now." "Oh boy, are there going to be fireworks?" "No. She and I broke up on Sunday. Now we're officially toast." "What are the chances I would have heard from you if Thursday hadn't happened?" "Almost none. But Thursday did happen, and we came here to have a good time, so let's get started." She took my hand and led me across the room to introduce me to my host. Laura, who had been standing off to the side when we entered, saw me and made a shocked expression on her face. Shocked because she didn't expect to see me at a party like this, or because I caught her with a new guy again. I don't know. I ignored her as Robin led me to a tall man standing with a tall blonde woman. She introduced me to Gary and his wife Artis, and we made small talk for a couple minutes before Robin led me away to get us drinks. The basement had been turned into a rec room and was being used as a dance floor. Robin and I danced and drank. She introduced me to a few people, and I had a great time. Every time I noticed Laura, she looked at me with an expression on her face that I couldn't read. Around 11, Robin said she had to leave because she had some pressing business for Saturday, so we saw our hosts off and said our goodbyes. As I was driving Robin home, she said, "Looks like your ex spent a lot of time today looking in your direction. Probably surprised to see me there." "No, I got the impression she was uncomfortable seeing you with another girl." "Tough shit. She's the one who made me end our relationship." "Maybe, but I don't think she's happy about it." "Maybe not, but she'll have to get used to it." "Does that mean we'll see each other more often or that you'll start dating all the girls?" "I prefer to date one girl at a time. I enjoyed your company tonight and I'm going to ask you out again. If you don't turn me down, you'll be my only girl. What if I'm not ready to hang out with one guy all the time? Then you'll say no when I ask, and I'll go find another girl to date. When she says no, I'll call you and see how things are going. If she still says no, I'll find a third girl and repeat this process until I find one that never says no. Well, I like your attitude and I see the possibilities, so maybe we'll give it a try. How about tomorrow night? Sounds good? I walked her to the door, said goodnight, and as I turned to leave, she asked me to wait a minute. I turned back to her and she said, I never kiss on the first date, but I guess there has to be a first time for everything. And she kissed me. I'll see you tomorrow, she said as she left for the house. And when I got home, Dad was still awake and told me that Laura had called and that she was upset. I told him it was too late and that I would do it in the morning. Out of habit, I slept late Saturday morning, and when I got up and headed to the kitchen for my first cup of coffee, my mom told me that I should call Laura. She's already called twice this morning. Not until I've had my first cup of coffee. Is something not going well with you two? It's not just the two of us anymore. Does she know about this? She should. After all, she's the one who made the decision. At that moment, the phone rang. Mom picked it up and said, It's for you. It's Laura. I picked up the phone and said, Yes? Why didn't you call? It was too late to call when I got home last night, and I just got out of bed this morning. That's not what I meant. I mean, why didn't you call me last night to pick me up for our usual date Friday night? We discussed it last Sunday, Laura. You told me that we weren't in an exclusive relationship and had decided to date others. I told you that it was enough that you were dating others, then I would date you too, and you jumped out of the house. That's not what I meant, Rob. You should have known that. Don't give me that crap, Laura. You were already dating that clown I saw you with last Thursday. I wasn't with him, Rob. I went to the party alone and he just happened to be there. Sure, Laura, whatever you say. It doesn't make any difference. I'm starting to hear different things about you and what you did, like how you got the nickname Miss Piggy. I don't know what you've heard, Rob, but it's not true. Said that. Why wouldn't I believe it's true after I saw you with your buddy at the restaurant? And I won't believe that you just happened to meet him at a party. He was standing too close to you and hugging you when I walked into the party. No, Laura, you're not interested in staying with just me, and I'm not interested in being one of many. I'd appreciate it if you'd give me back the ring and the sweater with the letter. I realize it's a little too high school for an adult like you, and it doesn't seem to mean anything to you. I'll see you later. Goodbye. That sounded pretty final, my mom said. She decided that being my constant friend wasn't enough for her, and like I just said, I wasn't interested in standing in line. I started keeping Robin's constant company. While all this was going on, I received letters from Jim about every 2 weeks or so telling me how things were going in his life. He graduated from camp and enrolled in special training. He was assigned to a Navy construction battalion, otherwise known as the Navy SEALs. He learned to build and destroy. He never asked about Annabelle, so when I wrote my response, I didn't mention Annabelle either. I wouldn't have, though. He wouldn't have liked hearing about what she was doing. Not even a week later, Annabelle was already courting some guy she met at a party. A month later, he was gone, and Annabelle started living with a guy she met at work. And another 3 months later, he was gone, and she started living with a black guy she met when he towed her car to the store when it broke down. I don't know for sure, but I heard he made her pull trains for a bunch of her friends at his apartment. And then Annabelle suddenly disappeared, and no one knew where she went. At least until I got a letter from Jim. He had finally graduated and was sent to Norfolk for a permanent job. As soon as he arrived there, he sent for Annabelle, and she went to see him. I wish you could come and be my best man, but we haven't had much time to get everything ready. The sooner we get this done, the sooner we can get on the list for on-base housing. Poor bastard, I thought. The first time you come, she'll have some other guy between her legs before the sound of the door closing behind you even subsides. I wasn't short of money, as my grandparents had set up a college fund for me the day I was born. There was enough money in it to pay for college and rent an off-campus apartment if I wanted to. So at the beginning of my junior year, Robin and I moved in together, and I began to get a taste of what family life was like. I loved it. After living together for about 6 months, I started thinking about making it permanent. I still had a feeling that what Robin and I had was too good to be true, but Robin wasn't giving any signs that she didn't want to continue our relationship. That is, She didn't show any signs until the day I suggested that she go looking for an engagement ring. It was then that she informed me that after graduation she was going to return to California and marry her childhood sweetheart, who was now in England on a Rhodes scholarship. He knew all about me, and she knew all about the English girl he was living with. We realized that there was no way two healthy young people could go a few years without sex, so we agreed to an open relationship. It wasn't going to affect us in any way, Rob, at least not immediately. But of course it did affect us, or me. Basically, it came down to the fact that I had just been ripped out of what I thought was a romantic relationship and put into a relationship with a mate. The problem was that I just didn't like having fun with my friends. I needed more than just sex, and Robin and I gradually drifted apart. 4 months, almost to the day, from the day Robin put an end to my romantic aspirations, she said to me, "You don't want to be here, do you?" I told her I didn't feel comfortable and explained why. "I'm sorry, love. I almost wish I didn't love Alex so much so I could be more of what you want. If it weren't for Alex, you'd be my man." "Thanks, I guess." "So what are we going to do? Flip a coin to determine who stays and who goes?" "No need. I knew this day was coming and Mom said she hadn't rented out my room yet. She decided it was best to leave it to me, at least until I turned 40 or until she gave me grandchildren. So you're staying and I'm leaving." "Friends?" "Always." She hugged me, then asked, "Last night, please?" I'd been home for a week, and on Friday night, as I sat in my room working on a paper I was supposed to turn in the following week, my mom called up the stairs. "Rob, there's someone here to see you." I went downstairs and found my mom talking to Laura. Mom looked at me and said, "I'll leave you two alone," and went into the kitchen. "Hi, Rob." "Hi, Laura. How are you doing?" "So-so, but I'm hoping things will get better." "Oh?" "Robin called me and told me you were back on the market and suggested that if I hurry, I could be first in line." "Why do you want to be first in line? Why do you even want to be first in line?" "There wouldn't be any line if I wasn't a fool. In fact, Robin would never exist. I don't want to be in line, Rob. I just want to get back to where I belong." "Where you belong?" She raised her left hand and said, "I never gave you your ring back." She had my class ring on the ring finger of her left hand. "There's a party at Alice Johnson's house tonight. Would you like to take me with you?" At the party, she waved the ring at me, and when I mentioned it, she said, "Just so everyone knows I claimed you, baby. I got you back, and let everyone know it." The main surprise happened after the party. She was silent as I drove her home. She just sat there staring out the passenger side window. As I pulled up to her house, I asked if she wanted to go apartment hunting with me on Saturday. "An apartment will be much cheaper in the long run than permanent motels." "Is that your way of asking if I want to move in with you?" "Such a thought has crossed my mind." "What time?" "Around 9. "Good. You have a date." Laura and I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment about midway between Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti, and turned the second bedroom into an office where we put Laura's computer desk and my desk. About a month after we moved in, Jim came home on a 30-day vacation, and he and Annabelle spent a lot of time with Laura and me. Jim and Annabelle seemed to get along great, so maybe I was wrong in my thoughts about her when she left. 3 weeks after Jim returned to duty, Annabelle showed up. Jim had gone to Iraq, and Annabelle decided she wasn't going to wait for Jim to return to the base. She wasn't home for 2 weeks and lived with the guy she lived with when she visited Jim in Norfolk. 3 weeks later, she was seen with a black guy she used to date, and rumors started up again about the orgies she was having at his apartment and the train rides she was taking for his friends. I thought about talking to her, but Laura talked me out of it. She said it was none of our business, and as far as we knew, Jim and Annabelle had an open marriage. I've heard that in the service it's not uncommon for both parties to agree that it's okay to play during a long separation, she said. It doesn't sound like something Jim would agree to. So what are you going to do? Write and tell him? He worships the ground she walks on. He won't thank you for telling him she's a whore. He'll probably end up blaming you for ruining his life. Leave that to Rob. Jim returned from Afghanistan in time to be best man at my wedding to Laura, and then he and Annabelle went to Norfolk, where he finished the last 9 months of his service. When he was discharged, he and Annabelle returned home, and he found work with a construction company as a heavy equipment operator. The next 2 years flew by, and the Marshalls, Jim and Annabelle, became frequent visitors to our home, and we saw them at least once every 2 weeks or so. Everything seemed to be fine between Jim and Annabelle, and there was no indication that she was cheating on Jim. I decided that was the most appropriate explanation, and Laura's theory proved to be correct when the company Jim worked for went out to bid and got a job laying a pipeline in Alaska. Conditions on and around the construction site were harsh, so Jim decided to leave Annabelle at home for the 4 months he would be away. Not a week later, Annabelle was seen in a motel room with Gary Mellows, the owner of the company Jim worked for, and after that Gary's car was seen parked in Jim's driveway almost every night of the week. There were problems with the job in Alaska, and it was extended for another 2 months. Laura and Annabelle were seeing the same doctor, and it just so happened that Laura was in the doctor's office the day Annabelle got the bad news. She was 7 weeks pregnant, and Jim was just over 3 months gone. The way Laura found out was this. Two nurses who worked at the clinic had studied with us and knew that she knew Annabelle and that she spent a lot of time around Annabelle, and they asked her how she thought Jim would take the news. Patient confidentiality takes a back seat to throwing mud among friends. And Laura thought for a minute and then said, Jim will never know. If I'm right in my assumptions, Annabelle will have an abortion and it will all be over before Jim even gets home. It wasn't like that. Someone Laura wouldn't discourage had let Jim know what was going on. Jim flew home, rented a car, and parked on the next street over from his house until he saw Mellows pull into his driveway, park, and enter the house. He waited 15 minutes to give Gary and Annabelle time to get down to business, and then entered the house with a digital camera at the ready and filmed the lovers in action. 15 minutes later, an ambulance responded to the 911 call, and Mellows was taken to the hospital. The police who arrived were about to take Jim away until he showed them the pictures he had taken. The camera was a Canon Rebel. Jim had set it to continuous shooting mode, and the series showed Mellows lunging at Jim. He may have been just trying to get to the camera and take it away from Jim, but the way the series of shots turned out, Jim realized he was being attacked and was only defending himself. The cops bought it and left. 20 minutes after the cops left, Annabelle came out on the porch with one suitcase and closed the door behind her. The divorce went smoothly, as did the lawsuit filed against Mellows for alienation of affection. He also sued Mellows for some sort of harassment, claiming that Mellows only hired him to run him out of town and then move in with his wife. Mellows could have made an out-of-court agreement and avoided publicity, but he decided to fight, and as a result, everyone found out what he was doing with the employee's wife after he sent him out of town for an extended period of time. The jury ruled in Jim's favor and awarded him $1.3 million. After paying court costs and taxes, he was left with a little over $750,000. He paid off the house, put in an in-ground pool, and bought a new Ford F-350. As soon as the divorce was finalized, Annabelle disappeared from sight, and rumor had it that she had moved out of town. Mellows had to sell some of his equipment and property to settle the lawsuit, and he lost a lot of business when some customers and potential customers decided that a man who did what he did to his employee's wife could not be trusted. Jim still had some money left, and he came to me to suggest that I start my own company and take over the business that Mellows had lost. I would do the design, and Jim would do the construction. Laura and I talked it over, analyzed our finances, and decided to do it, and R&J Constructors was born as a partnership. We've made it work. Not only did we pick up many of the clients that left Mellows, but we beat him at a few jobs. And human nature being what it is, Jim made sure everyone knew when we beat Mellows. The next 5 years flew by. Jim played the stock market but never found anyone he wanted to commit his life to forever. He spent a lot of time with me and Laura, and on average we went out with Jim and his girlfriend once a week. Things were going great. Laura had moved up in her company, becoming a regional manager and a favorite for vice president. I didn't think things could get much better, and unfortunately, I was right. It was a Tuesday, and I was just finishing up a lunch meeting with a potential client when Gary Mellows approached me and asked if he could buy me a drink. Personally, I had nothing against Gary. I believed that if a trashy girl like Annabelle offered it to a single guy like Gary, you couldn't blame him for accepting the gift. I never believed the story about Gary sending Jim out of town for Annabelle. I always knew Annabelle was a slut, so I figured Annabelle probably did something like go to Gary's office to pick up Jim's paycheck and let Gary know she was lonely because of Jim's absence. Anyway, his problems had to do with Jim, not me, so I took him up on his offer to buy me a drink. As soon as he sat down, he asked, "How's it going?" "Not bad, but it could be better." Maybe you'll consider selling? Selling? Why would I want to do that? To make your buddy Jim my partner. Are you smoking some kind of crap? Not really. I don't want to be the one to do it, but take a look at this. He opened his briefcase, pulled out a folder, and held it out to me. I took it, opened it, and was stunned. The first thing I saw in the folder was a picture of Laura and Jim holding hands as they entered the motel room. There were several more pictures of the two of them going in and out of the motel room, and another half-dozen pictures of them in various places, kissing and hugging. I looked at Gary, and he said, "Sorry, I was following him to get something on him, to get back at him. When the private investigator brought me those pictures, I didn't know she was your wife. I knew from the rings in the pictures that she was a stranger, so I put a private investigator on her to find out who she was so I'd have the information when I started my revenge." "Why? You were guilty. You did what he said." "No, I didn't. Yes, I had an affair with his wife, but I never sent him out of town to get to her." She walked into my office, closed the door behind her, and began to undress. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "You sent Jim out of town, so you're going to have to take care of me until he gets back." I'm not married, so I have to say no to Annabelle? As far as I'm concerned, this whole mess is Jim's fault from the beginning. Everyone knows Annabelle is a slut and has been since high school. Jim should have known. He should have known, but he didn't do anything about it. No, Rob. He screwed me with that lawsuit and I'm going to get it back. I'm just sorry you got caught in the middle of it. Any idea how long this has been going on? The private investigator says from what he's been able to find out, it's been at least a year, probably more. How the hell could it have gone on that long and I didn't find out about it? If she never did anything that would make you suspicious, how could you have found out about it? So why do you want to buy me out? What do you gain by becoming Jim's partner? Think about it. As an equal partner, I have an equal say. He says we need to do A, and I say no, we need to do B. No matter what he wants, I will be 180 degrees off. In addition, I will know what prices we charge for the work and make sure the other company charges lower prices. I'll bankrupt the company and Jim will lose his ass. But you will too? Not exactly. I've checked everything out. If the business goes bust, we'll sell off the assets and I'll get most of my money back. I won't make anything unless, of course, you count what I get from my other company when I underprice the jobs Jim bids on, but I won't lose much either. What if he decides to just stomp your ass every morning to start your day off right until you get bored and sell your half to him or someone else? Last time he caught me on top of his wife and all I could think about was taking the camera away from him. He managed 3 good shots before it dawned on me that I should be defending myself, not worrying about that stupid camera. If he tries that again, he won't have it so easy. In fact, I'm pretty sure I can handle him if it comes to that. So are you interested? Maybe, but I want to do a little digging on my own first. If you decide, do you have an approximate amount you'd like to get? I told him the amount, and he said it was a possibility, and for me to call him if I decided to do it. I left the meeting with Mellows in a state of confusion. How the hell could Laura and Jim have been doing this behind my back for almost a year, and I hadn't had the slightest suspicion? I had seen absolutely nothing to indicate that Laura was displeased with me. I saw no loss of affection. Our life was still wonderful, at least it seemed so to me. What had gone wrong? I had no reason to doubt Detective Gary's report and photos, but the photos could have been doctored, and Gary had his own agenda. I wanted to be absolutely sure before taking any action, so I went back to the office, called a friend who worked at an insurance agency, and asked who they used to investigate suspicious cases. Armed with that information, I called, made an appointment, and 13 days later, I had confidence. On Wednesdays, when Jim supposedly traveled to the job sites, he was actually meeting Laura at the Comfort Inn on Melrose. I had no idea how she managed to carve out time for their meetings when she wasn't at work. All I had to do was decide what to do. I actually knew what I wanted to do, but I had to find a way to make it work. Within 2 hours of working with my lawyer, I had a list of what I could and couldn't do, and a list of what I needed to do. We have no fault, so everything will have to be shared equally. It bothered me that she wouldn't get a dime of what I made from selling my half of the company. Eventually, I had to admit that the only way to do that was to lie. Even so, she'd still get some of the money. I made a deal with Mellows that I would sell him my share of the company on paper for 1/3 of what he actually paid. That third went into a bank account in my name only. The other two-thirds was transferred to an offshore account I had set up. It was agreed that he would not show up at the office or occupy my desk until the morning I handed Laura and Jim the papers. Laura for divorce on grounds of adultery, Jim for alienation of affection. Even though we were in a no-fault state, I could still sue for adultery, and depending on which judge we got, that could mean not 50-50, but a little better. For the grounds for adultery to be valid, I needed proof. An analysis of Gary's private investigators' reports and mine showed that every time they were under surveillance, they used the same motel, and it was always on a Wednesday. My detective would rent a room and set it up for recording, and a bribe to the porter would guarantee that they would be put in that particular room. On Wednesday morning, I called Maria, our secretary, and asked her to tell Jim that I wouldn't be in that morning because of a dentist appointment. And tell him that if I don't feel well after my tooth extraction, I may not even show up after lunch. You got it, boss. If I were you, I'd go home and rest. I've never had a tooth extracted yet that didn't hurt when the effects of the mixing gas wear off. I left the house and returned to it after Laura had gone to work. The locksmith came at 9, changing all the locks in the house. As soon as he was done, I went to the bank and cleaned out the accounts and the safe. The lawyer told me to only take half, but my mood was stone cold. Screw you, Laura. And I wasn't going to do anything to make it easy for her. She would get her half eventually, but only after she had to fight for it. I also withdrew the money I thought I was getting from the business. If it was too much, Jim could go to court and try to get the money back, but while I had it, he didn't. My detective called me at 12:10 and informed me that the happy couple had arrived and were in room 128. I drove up, had a few words with the detective, and then sat on the hood of the car parked in front of the suite and waited for them to come out. After a mini confrontation, I got in my car and drove off. As I drove away, a man got out of the car, walked over to them, and handed them the papers. Along with the divorce papers, Laura got a temporary restraining order prohibiting her from being within 500 feet of me in the house. To get it, I had to do a little trickery. I had to lie and say that a third party had informed me that Jim and Laura had overheard them discussing how much insurance I had and wondering how much my share of the business was worth. There was a hearing pending on whether to make it permanent, but it could drag on for a couple weeks. It was just another way to mess with Laura. The main thing was that she couldn't enter the house without someone from the court present, and I wasn't about to make myself available to make keys to the new locks. Along with Jim's papers for the foreclosure suit was a short note. It read, "You know how these lawsuits work, don't you? How does it feel to be on the other end of one of them?" Pulling away from the motel, I called Gary on his cell phone. "Everything's all set. Have a good first day at the office tomorrow." I drove to the airport, parked my car in the long-term parking lot, threw my cell phone in the glove compartment, and boarded the flight to Cabo San Lucas. I spent a week scuba diving and lying on the beach and then flew home. When I turned on my phone, it was flooded with voicemails. Not surprisingly, most of them were from Laura, but there were 4 from Jim as well. You'd think I was the last person he'd want to talk to. No matter. I wasn't interested in talking to him or Laura. Did I want an explanation? Of course I wanted to know why, but I made the decision to put these 2 in the past and move on with my life. The reasons for their betrayal were not to occupy my thoughts. My lawyer knew I would be gone for a week, so I decided to call him and let him know I was back. He asked me to call Laura and let her know of my return. She called him twice a day, trying to contact me to come into the house and get my things. I was on the verge of telling him to call her and make arrangements with the court to let her into the house under supervision when a thought struck me. Another way to mess with her. I called her and asked her what she needed. I need to get my clothes and other things, but I can't even get into the house with someone from the court because I don't have a key and the court people won't let me in. You don't have anything there to take away. I gave everything to Goodwill. I don't want anything of yours in the house to remind me of your lying, cheating ass. There's nothing of yours here anymore, not even a hair clip. Damn it, Rob, you had no right to do that? I had as much right to do it as you had to stab me in the back. We need to talk, Rob. It's not what you think. Be honest, Laura. I don't think you were having fun with Jim. I know that for a fact. Goodbye, Laura. I hung up the phone. All of her stuff was still in the house, but then again, I wanted to mess with her. Eventually, she would get her stuff, but it wouldn't be soon. I had always been on good terms with Maria, who was our receptionist, secretary, bookkeeper, head cook, and bottle washer. So I called her and asked her how things were going. Not bad for me, but not so good for the company. Nothing is working out. Gary and Jim fight all the time over the most insignificant little things. Jim says something needs to be done, and Gary replies that he doesn't need to do it. Jim calls and orders something, and as soon as Jim leaves the office, Gary calls and cancels the order. We have work that needs to be started, but it just stands there while Jim and Gary take care of it. I'm so sick of it that I tendered my resignation last Friday, but Gary said he'd double my salary if I stayed, so naturally I'm not going to leave. They had a fist fight on Thursday, but there was no winner in it, although Jim did get a broken nose. Why did you leave us? Why did you sell out to Gary? I told her the whole story. She was quiet for a minute, and then she said, "Now I have one more reason to stay." And what's that? I can help Gary. I never liked Jim. He was always hitting on me even though he knew I was engaged. He even hinted once that he'd let me go if I didn't go on a date with him, and we both know what he meant when he said, "Go on a date." I asked him what you would have said about him letting me go, and that shut him up. You should have told me. Why? It was a personal problem and I dealt with it. I'm sorry for you and Laura Robb, but maybe there's a bright side to it, at least for me. And what's that? It means you're back on the market. How do you feel about being hunted? I thought you were engaged? I was, until I caught that asshole doing to me what he did to you, Laura. When did that happen? About 3 weeks ago. Well, honey, if you're worth it, I'll put your name at the top of the list when I start dating again. But that won't be for a while. I'm not going to give Laura anything she can use against me. I can wait, but keep me in mind if you get lonely and want company for dinner. I will, honey, and thank you. My phone rang 16 times that day. 14 from Laura and 2 from Jim. I couldn't think of anything Jim could say that I wanted to hear, and if he was calling to ask for something, it certainly wasn't from me. I deleted all the calls and went home. Cooked myself dinner, and then out of a whim I called Gary Mellows and asked how his plan was working. Not bad at all. I made sure I was sitting at your desk when he got to work. He saw me and frowned and then asked what the hell I was doing in the office and sitting at your desk. I laughed and told him I was his new partner. The look on his face was priceless. You could almost see the steam coming out of his ears as he read a copy of our agreement. I gave us the go-ahead almost immediately. He called for a fuel truck because the front-end loader and other equipment at Wilkins' site had run out of diesel fuel. As soon as he left the office, I called and canceled the order. One of the loaders ran out of fuel, and Jim called Allied and berated them, and they told him that I canceled the order and that they would have to put up with that kind of crap from him and get fuel from someone else. That's when he came up to me and asked what the hell I was doing. I told him that Allied was charging us too much and that I was looking for a better price, and it went downhill from there. A little birdie told me you two got into a fist fight. Yes, it ended last Thursday. And what came out of it? I guess I was a little optimistic when I told you I thought I could take him, but I got over it and hurt him. Well, carry on, and good luck with your plan. After hanging up the phone, I went to the room I had converted into an office, turned on my computer and started typing up my resume. I would start my job search the next day. I was just typing on the keyboard when the doorbell rang. I opened the door and saw Jim standing there. What the hell do you want? We need to talk, Rob. No, you don't, asshole. It's not my fault, Rob. She came after me. She caught me when I was in a really bad mood because of what Annabelle did to me. I wasn't thinking straight, Rob. I'm sorry, Rob, but it wasn't my fault. I didn't pursue her. But you knew she was my wife. You knew how you felt when you found out about Annabelle, and you didn't even stop for a second to think you'd make me feel the same way, did you? You had to know I'd find out sooner or later, and probably the same way you found out about Annabelle. Someone told you. Well, asshole, someone told me. You're a jerk, as far as I'm concerned. You're supposed to be my friend, and even if I believe Laura made a move on you, which I don't, you should have turned your back on her the same way I turned my back on Annabelle when she made a move on me. You knew you were better off, but you did it anyway. And even if it's true that she made a move and caught you when you weren't thinking straight, that doesn't justify the second, third, fourth, and however many times after that. No, you stuck a knife in my back and there's no avoiding it. Why did you load me up with Mello? Because in the mood I was in when I found out, and the rage I felt, if I'd come after you, I'd probably have things differently, and you're not worth going to jail over. Besides, sticking you with Mellows will give you grief that will last far longer than the aftermath of any beating. But you know what? The rage I was feeling at the time is gone. And that's when I hit him. I grabbed him by his shirt, dragged him into the house, slammed the door behind me, and stomped the hell out of him. He was unconscious when I dragged him out of the house and shoved him into the car. You wouldn't believe the smile I had when I got back in the house. The police would probably come to see me, but I didn't care. All I had to do was say he attacked me and I defended myself, refer to his fight with Mellows, and say he was mad at me because I sold my half of the business to Mellows and he was trying to make me pay for it. The next morning I sent out 14 resumes and then called my attorney to see how things were going. He informed me that there would be a hearing on the temporary restraining order this coming Monday, but he hadn't received any communication from Laura or the attorney on her behalf. I considered calling Laura, but decided to refrain. The more time that passed before she hired an attorney, the more time would pass before I had to communicate anything to her. Over the course of the week, I received several responses to the resumes I had sent out and flew to Atlanta for an interview on Wednesday and ended up in Baltimore on Thursday. I liked both interviews, but I also heard back from a company in San Diego and thought I might just like living in a place where it's almost always warm. So I called and scheduled an interview for the following Tuesday. On Monday, there was a hearing on the temporary restraining order, and to everyone's surprise, the judge found no reason to lift it, and I was ordered to allow Laura access to the house. Laura, of course, was present at the hearing and had an attorney with her. She came up to me and started to say something. I stepped away from her and called my attorney, and then came back to her. Said, "Annette, you're not telling me anything until my attorney is present. I just wanted to tell you that I'm coming tonight." "No, you won't. I'm flying out for an interview at 2:30 and won't be home until Wednesday. You can come anytime after 6. Her lawyer started to say something, but I interrupted him. "She will not, I repeat, will not be in this house unless I keep an eye on everything she does. There will be someone from the court there to keep an eye on everything, and you can also have one of your lawyers there." "No, that won't work. They won't have a clue about what she's allowing herself. All they'll do is make a list, and if it's something she shouldn't have taken, I'll have to fight to get it back. She wasn't home for 2 weeks and she survived. Another 48 hours won't destroy her." Her lawyer shook his head negatively and said, "Then I guess we'll have to see what the judge says," and turned to go back to the court clerk, but Laura stopped him. "Just drop it," she said. "I can wait another 48 hours. I looked at her and said, "Wednesday at 6, and turned to leave. "Hold on a second, Rob. Can we talk then?" "No," I said, and walked out of the building. I decided that the interview in San Diego had gone well and headed home, hoping to hear from them. Laura arrived at 6 with someone from her attorney's office. The woman from the courthouse arrived at 26, and we spent those 20 minutes drinking coffee and talking. She told me that her job was to conduct surveillance for the court and take an inventory of the items seized. She was also supposed to make a list of the items in dispute, but I told her that wasn't necessary. She can have whatever she wants. If you feel that way, why did you take such a hard stance against her? She stabbed me in the back, and she did it to a man who had been my best friend for over 25 years. I couldn't beat her up and destroy her, at least not if I wanted to avoid jail, but I had to do something to get back at her and make her suffer. It wasn't much, but at least it was something. At that moment, the doorbell rang. I let Laura and the man who was with her from the law office in, and went outside to cut the grass. When I finished and came back into the house, everyone was gone except Laura. She was sitting at the kitchen table sipping tea. She looked up at me when I walked in. "You lied to me. You didn't give any of my stuff to Goodwill." "Maybe not, but I sure as hell liked the way you took offense when you said I had no right to it. I didn't expect this to turn out to be all hers, and it's going to take me longer to figure it out than I expected." I pulled my keyring out of my pocket, extracted my house key, and held it out to her across the table. "Don't worry about moving. You can pick up the house on Friday. I'll have all my stuff out of here by then." "Why?" "I have a job interview, and I'll be moving out of state as soon as I get a job." "I mean, why did you do what you did if you were just going to give me the house and leave? Why the restraining order and the lies about giving my stuff away?" "That's a stupid question. After what you did to me, I had to do something to get back at you. Just be thankful that I decided to do it peacefully instead of violently. The fact that I went down on you doesn't even come close to making us even. but it's the best I could do without going to jail. Sen, I know you said no when I asked if we could talk tonight, but I'm still going to try to convince you that we don't need to divorce. Be serious, Laura. There's no way in hell we can stay together after what you've done. But that doesn't mean anything, Rob. I love you, and you know it. What happened with Jim was a mistake. Just a stupid mistake. I like Jim. I've always liked him, but I don't love him and I never have. I don't care if you loved him or not. You still had fun with him. And whether you loved him or not, it was still infidelity, and you shouldn't have any doubts about how I feel about that. All you have to do is remember how upset I was about what Annabelle was doing to Jim. I was so upset that I was going to tell him about it, but I let you talk me out of it. That should have told you how I'd feel about you doing that to me. And don't give me any of that. I didn't want you to find out crap. Cheaters always get caught. They always get caught sooner or later. Jim found out about Annabelle because someone saw her having fun with him and told him. That's how you got caught. Someone saw you and Jim go into the motel room and told me. Doesn't it matter that I love you? No, Laura, it doesn't, because it wasn't enough to keep you from cheating on me. But it didn't mean anything, Rob. Honestly, it meant nothing. It was an accident. An accident? How can sex with the man who used to be my best friend be an accident? Snaya. He stopped by our house when you were on a trip to Santa Fe, and he was in a bad mood about Annabelle. He really loved her, and despite cutting her out of his life, he missed her. We had a drink, and after a while he started crying, and I took him in my arms and hugged him and tried to comfort him. I remember thinking, this is so wrong. I shouldn't be doing this, but I feel so good. But I'll be honest, deceive felt really good. The next time you went out of town, Jim came over and we both realized why he came over and got back into it, he said. There was no love involved, Rob. As corny as it sounds, it was just sex, Rob. Just a little excitement in my life. I didn't neglect you once while all this was going on. I love you, Rob. I really do, and you know it. We can work through this. We don't need to get divorced. We has nothing to do with it, Laura. I need a divorce. I can't live with a man who betrayed me. It's simple, Laura. You betrayed me. If I left you, I'd be watching you like a hawk for the rest of my life, waiting for you to do it again. By your own admission, you kept doing it because you enjoyed the deception so much. You can promise me all you want that you'll never do it again, but your promises aren't worth a dime. You already promised me to leave everyone else behind when we got married, and you broke that promise. I can't believe anything you say, Laura. Jim's story of how it happened isn't even close to yours. According to Jim, it didn't happen by accident. According to him, you were playing a game with him. He could be lying, and you could be lying. The problem is, after what you both did, neither of you is credible, so I can't favor one story over the other. Bottom line, Laura, we've broken up as a couple. I'm not giving up, Rob. I'm going to fight for the divorce. I know we'll get through this because we love each other. You're mad at me right now, and justifiably so, but I can make you a promise and keep it, especially now that I see what breaking that promise could cost me. My lawyer says he can get the court to order counseling, and I know that can help. I love you, Rob, and I'm not letting you go. Run. You can't seem to realize that I don't need you right now. Okay, I'll admit that I still love you and it'll take me a while to get over it. But there's no way in hell I can live with you again. Every time I go to bed with you, I'll think about the fact that you were with that jerk who was my best friend, and I can't live like that. You will not seek a divorce from Laura because, if you do, I will release the videotape of your last encounter with Jim. Every family member, every friend, and all your coworkers will get a copy. I will create your own porn site for you, and there are dozens of amateur porn sites where I can put it up, and I will do it with your full name and address. It'll make your life very interesting. Bullshit, Rob. No such video exists. Oh no. Wait here. I went to the den where my briefcase was, pulled out a copy of the disc, went back to the kitchen, and handed it to her. Take a look at it. After you look at it, decide if you want someone else to watch it. Now, if you don't mind, there's something I need to do. You can pick up the house on Friday, but for now you have to go. On Thursday and Friday, I moved out of the house and put most of my stuff in storage. I then rented a room at the executive suites for a month, expecting to find a job by the end of it. Over the next 2 weeks, I went on job interviews in Salt Lake City, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Chicago, and Detroit, all of which I was happy with, but I didn't hear back from any of them. I sat down at my desk, figured out my finances, and decided I could live without a job for about 6 years, and started checking out other cities and states looking for places with a lower cost of living. A cost of living that would allow me to stretch those 6 years to 8, maybe 10. Laura signed the divorce papers and returned them to my attorney. I almost regretted that she had done that. I would have loved to have CDs of her and Jim's pictures scattered all over the house, but a deal is a deal. I made an agreement. The agreement called for a 50-50 division of the property, with each party paying their own attorney fees. I was the only one who filed the suit, so I paid the attorney fees. Laura said she wanted the house, and my half of the equity was a little more than the amount I had borrowed from the bank, so it was okay. True, I had to give Laura half of what I got from the sale of my half of the company, but I knew that would be the case and had made provisions for it. She did swear that I sold out too cheaply, but it didn't matter because the other 2/3 of what I got from the sale was safely stashed away. An interesting thing came to me through the grapevine. It seems that as soon as I was out of sight, Jim started stalking Laura and was so persistent that she had to issue a restraining order against him. It didn't bother me, of course, but I laughed about it. I decided to wait until the divorce was final before taking any action. Finally, I started getting calls from some of the companies I was interviewing with. One company in San Diego called and asked me to come and talk to them. But before I could call and make arrangements, I got a call from Gary Mellows. How would you like to get your company back? Why would I want my company back? I sold it to you so I could go back to Jim and get away from him. Why would I want to become his partner again? You wouldn't want to, but then you don't have to. After our last fight, I said, if you're so damn dissatisfied with me as a partner, I'll buy you out or sell your half to someone else. He thought about it for about 30 seconds and then asked me how much I would give for his half. He took half of what I gave you. And yet the question is, why should I want it back? If you did even half of what you told me you were going to do to set Jim up, the company probably isn't worth that much anymore. You might be surprised. Come to the office and let's talk. And I didn't think I had anything to lose, so I went to talk to him. When I walked in the door, Maria jumped up from her desk and hugged me, then poked her head through the office door and told Gary I had come. As you know, I only bought you out to screw Marshall. I didn't need or want him. But things are changing. I'm getting more and more immersed in the construction part of the business. I want to move away from the engineering aspect. For one thing, I couldn't get what I wanted in terms of engineers, so I started thinking about what to do. The solution that came to my mind was to call you and ask you to set up a company that I would contract with to do the engineering work, but then Marshall sold me the company and I thought, why not just sell you the company and contract with you? I can't afford to buy out my half and Jim's half. You won't have to pay that much because the company isn't worth that much anymore. Since I own the whole company, I've transferred all the construction work and construction equipment to my other company. I only have the engineering part left. I will sell you the company for the amount I paid Jim and sign a 5-year contract for engineering services. Plus, the company still has contracts with about 15 other firms. I don't see how you can lose. How much did you give Jim? He told me, and it was less than I had in my offshore account. But there is one condition. And what's that? I have no secrets from Maria, and I voiced the idea to her. She said that if you agree, she will stay with you and not move to my company. If you agree to the deal, you will stay with her. I didn't have to think long and I told him that I would agree to the deal, but to back it up, I would not do it until my divorce was finalized, which wouldn't be for another 3 weeks. Gary said he was fine with that and we agreed to the deal. As I was leaving the office, Maria said, I heard. Don't forget that at the end of those 3 weeks, you promised that I would be first on the list. I didn't think you were serious about that. You can rest assured I am, she said, with a 1,000-watt smile. As I pulled away from the curb, my cell phone rang, and it was my lawyer. Jim had learned his lesson from what happened to Gary when Gary sued Jim, and had called my lawyer with an offer to settle the case. I told the lawyer to take it. I made it the rest of the way to my room at the executive suites with a huge smile on my face. In 3 weeks, I could start a new life, with a new job, a new girlfriend, and money in the bank. I could have spent those 3 weeks looking for a place to live and buying furniture. Who says nice guys always finish last? Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.